Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. Let's start from the military map review. We have some of the good news coming from the Liman direction. There, for the several months Russia tries to reach Terny village, but now Ukraine has two of the counterattacks trying to cut the Russian attack vector, and Ukrainian forces constantly ambush the Russian attacks. We have the confirmation about it from the Institute for the Study of War and also from other sources. Let me show you the 3D map of the place. So now for Ukraine it's kind of hard actually to defend this area, because Russia, as you can see, has a higher ground compared to the place where Ukrainian positions are stated. But the terrain is not easy for the Russian army advancement either. It's kind of complicated with those rivers, elevations and valleys. In a worst case scenario, Ukraine has two of the way outs from the place through those dams, plus the Ukrainian army might move to the north just in case. Hopefully Ukraine wouldn't retreat from the area, but we have the warning messages from the United States Army. General Cavoli warned Congress that in a couple of weeks Russia would have superiority over Ukraine in artillery 10-1. So Ukrainian army would have to leave many of the positions on the east and probably also on the south. Now the hottest spot on the front lines is Chiz Yar over here. Russia, as you can see, moved in Ivanovsk, occupying this settlement. And their next target is this one. But the recent attacks definitely were not successful. Many Russian tanks were just abandoned and some of them were without any sort of the grills to protect the tanks against the drone activity. We see that Russia has a limited resource in Chiz Yar so far. Mainly they concentrated their forces in other direction in Avdiivka. The Russians also were demolished. It brings them to the problem of the military vehicles. They're basically running out of those. Now we see that they use tanks as the infantry vehicles and also civilian cars. But they still have plenty of the Soviet-made vehicles in their storages back in Russia. The only thing that they need to move them quickly closer to the front lines. And we have the confirmation that Russia lost 77 of their vehicle units near Ternenka alone. It means that Ukraine will have some term break before Russia accumulates new forces for new strikes. Guys, just a short break here. Again, my last video was restricted by YouTube, so if you want to support my job that I do daily over here, you may support me via Patreon, and by other means you may find them in the video description just below, or scan the QR code for my Patreon page. You may find it just on the screen. Thank you so much for your kind support. We have good news about the Russian fuel production. Gasoline production dropped quite a lot recently in Russia. It's connected to the strikes on the Russian oil refineries. Usually the graph goes up during the springtime because agriculture sector needs lots of the diesel. But we have this conversation today coming from the United States. Guys, I want you to listen it. Let's listen together.
When the Ukrainians hit Russia's oil and gas infrastructure, the Biden administration came out and condemned the Ukrainians for hitting Russia's oil and gas infrastructure and suggested that they should not do that again. Can you tell me why? While Russia is attacking Ukrainians' oil and gas and energy sector, why shouldn't the Ukrainians attack the Russian oil and gas and energy sector?
Miss or Mrs. Valander is the High Representative of the United States military. Let's listen to her answer.
The issue on attacking critical infrastructure is when those are civilian targets, we have concerns because Ukraine holds itself to the highest standards of observing the laws of armed conflict, and that's one of the elements of being a European democracy.
But the Russians are attacking the oil and gas infrastructure in Ukraine, correct?
Absolutely.
And if you're going to win a war, you can't sit back and take punches and not deliver punches. So why shouldn't the Ukrainians attack the oil and gas infrastructure in Russia?
Congressman, we have concerns about striking at civilian targets when we support countries. Again, this is Ukraine's sovereign decision, but we express those concerns.
But those oil and gas infrastructures in Russia are owned by the Kremlin, correct? It's not like they're owned by a private corporation that have shareholders and private assets are being destroyed.
They are owned by private Russian citizens who are part of the Putin regime. That is correct.
I mean, it makes sense to me that we should destroy them.
Absolutely. So we have some of the wise thoughts, for example, from this guy in the United States. Probably the policy of the current White House administration is not to escalate elsewhere. They're afraid that it might touch oil markets and many other things. And clearly it's nonsense to say that those are the civilian targets. If we want to drain down the tanks of the Russian tanks, we should continue to target those not civilian targets. And just an example for you, here we have some of the images from the United States and coalition operation in Iraq and also Kuwait called the Sandstorm back in 1990. So as you can see, lots of the fuel on fire, including oil refineries which belonged to Saddam Hussein. Back then it wasn't a civilian infrastructure. It means that we live in an unfair world in general. Every country follows its own interests. So this time the same oil infrastructure, not Saddam's but Putin's, is called a civilian one. And today Zelensky again said that we are not using the Western-made weaponry to target the Russian Federation, but we're gonna use the Ukrainian-made tools to respond to the Russian aggression. So Zelensky made it clear that Ukraine will continue with its mission targeting the oil and gas infrastructure of the Russian Federation. I think that it is a proper way to do it. By the way, we have a statement from the Secretary of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg. He confirmed that Ukraine has all of the rights to target the Russian infrastructure which is connected to the Russian military. The Russian oil refineries absolutely do connect it with the Russian military infrastructure. Alright, we have some interesting news that Russia lost one of their propaganda journalists in Crimea. Luhansk direction. It happened during the Ukrainian strike on the place. So those are the images that were filmed right at the spot. The shell went very close, so the guy was injured and kaputted on the way to hospital. Alright, this is the image of the Russian city of Orenburg, the big capital city of the oblast, Orenburg Oblast. You can see that partially it is already flooded by the river of Ural. Here it was a private sector with many of the fields, but the city center still stays above the water level. But probably it's not for a long time. The main issue with the floodings in Russia are those substances that could appear again on the surface after the water goes down. Because there are lots of the factories which just dig down to the ground all of their polluted emissions. Plus cemeteries, so everything of that will be now in the city, creating a huge risk of disease. And you know what? Putin's representative in the region already accused Kazakhstan for not dropping the water level at the proper time on their side. He said that it caused floodings in Russia, but before they say that mice destroyed the dam in Russia, so kind of the strange versions are coming from Russia, as always. It seems like Ukraine is preparing one more counterattack. Zelensky says that he has a plan for it, but now it's impossible to make it real because Ukraine is in lack of the military resources. He also commented on Trump's peace deal, saying that trading Ukrainian territory to Russia is a very primitive thing to do. But because of the deficit with artillery shells, Ukraine started to use more of the FPV drones. And miraculously, those are more precise compared to the artillery systems. If Ukraine will continue to successfully use these tactics in the future, Russians would not be able to commence their mid-wave tactics. Zelensky also said that Scholz doesn't want to give towers to Ukraine because it's the most powerful long-range tool of Germany. So Germany doesn't have nukes. That's why towers is the only option for Germany to strike enemy behind the front lines. Well, they also have aviation, but definitely without the United States support, Germany is unable to fight with aggressors like Russia. Russia continued to lose their helicopters for a unknown reason. The anti-submarine helicopter K-27 crashed today in Crimea. We have just to report the fact of it that it happened, but no any details about the particular crash. Also, we have the confirmation that Russia lost a Milev-24 attack helicopter today. They shared their condolences in their social media accounts, so I believe that it is true. Some interesting news are coming from the NATO alliance. They want to establish the military base in Mykeli city, very close to the Russian border. It will be one of the main headquarters of the NATO military command. So with this full-scale war against Ukraine, Russia got two of the new countries into NATO and also the big military base right at its borders. At the same time, as Putin was saying, the main goal of the special military operation, one of those, was to reduce the NATO influence in Europe. Somehow it doesn't work according to the Russians' plan. We had the news that the United States will transfer the Hawk air defense missiles to Ukraine, but Ukraine will pay for it, unfortunately, because Congress still blocks the military support for Ukraine. The only way to get some new equipment is just to pay for it. That is what Ukraine does right now. But again, I believe that the funds to purchase those tools were allocated by other Ukrainian allies. To some of the international news, we have more warnings that Iran might strike Israel in a nearby future. Mostly warnings came from the United States intelligence, and today Lufthansa Airlines suspended its flights to Iran just for the next 24 hours, but they might extend it. At the same time, a couple of days ago, Israel warned that it might strike Iranian nuclear facilities in case Iran would dare to attack Israel with its missiles and drones. So the tensions in the Middle East region are very, very high, might just escalate at any minute. And now, my friends, please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot. And as usual, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.